Hello coaches and welcome to this edition of Give and Go Live. My name's Dave Newberry and today's topic is 4 versus 2 possession to target, an attacking focused activity. The setup is a 30 by 15 yards area with two halves of the field approximately 15 by 15. In one half you have a 4 versus 2 and in the other half of the field we have the remaining two players for the defending team. So in this example, we have 4 blue players in one half of the field playing against 2 red, and then the other 2 teammates for the red team are in the other half of the field. The coach is on the sideline feeding the balls in, and there are 2 target players playing for the team in possession at either end of the field, and they cannot enter the field. And the objective is for the attacking team to make 3 or more passes before passing over into the other end of the field to the target player. So the coach passes in, and then from there on, its objective is to get 3 or 4 passes or more before passing to the target player. The only rule to increase the intensity is that if the Blues decide to make more than 3 passes, the Reds can send in a 3rd defender. The coach always restarts every activity. So let's talk about some of the methodologies in this activity. And this one has many opportunities for the coaches to bring out all sorts of themes. But the ones that we're really looking at here are attacking themes. So the principles of attack, such as width. So the idea that the players will move wide to use as much space as possible. To create height and depth. Height being vertical height and depth being vertical depth. So support from behind and support from the front. We also are looking at the angles of support. So I like to talk to my players about trying to get on 45-degree angles as opposed to a square pass. So can we try and get in a position where we can support, and when a pass is made, we can break through a line of the defense. And then other concepts we can talk about is the idea of penetrating through between the players, around, going to the side, or of course going over and playing in behind the defense. And certainly for younger players, playing through or around are easier concepts to work with the players than going over. And then lastly, we talk about mobility, the idea that the players have to be moving and they've got to try, if they can, to move and find space between players, between defenders, behind defenders, and as best as possible to find space when they can receive the ball. In the second sequence, the activity progresses. The blue team have made their 3 or 4 passes, and now they play to the target player at the far end. The 2 red defenders can intercept if they can, or you can put a condition on it at the beginning that those players are only live when the ball does go to the target player. As the ball does transfer from one end to the other, then the blue team all move into that area as quickly as possible. So the 4 blues move into this area, and the 2 reds that were in the area now have to defend again 4 versus 2, and the objective is exactly the same as it was before. They have to try and get 3 passes or more. The defenders, if they win it, then their objective is now to play to the other end of the field, and then they maintain possession and they play 4 versus 2 with 2 blues in each half of the field defending. So some other concepts that you can work from an attacking perspective and defending perspective. One is transition, the idea when the ball changes possession, blues lose it, reds win it, then we have to be quick to move for the red team into attacking formations, into space, looking at the principles of plays we looked at on the last slide, but then also the blue team have to get back into defensive shape. And those principles of pressure, cover, balance, for example, compactness. The other considerations are the movement of players, and particularly in the attacking context, when the ball moves, all four players on the attacking team, the blue team, should also move as well. And that's a concept I use a lot with my youth players. Every time the ball moves, all the players on the attacking side of the ball must move as well. And this is a good opportunity for us to start teaching some of the technical detail that we want for our players. So if we want this to be a more advanced session, we start looking at what do the players do before the ball arrives, what do they do when they receive it, and how do they receive it? What type of pass do they make along the ground, in the air? Is it bent? Is it chipped? Is it driven? And then once they've played it, which is the hardest concept for young players to learn, is they must then move into a position to support. And I like my players to think of maintaining the distance between them and the player and moving into a position that provides a different angle, but try not to run towards the ball. And we do a lot of practices as coaches where we pass the ball and run towards the player that received the ball. I try to make sure that the players run at a different angle to try and maintain those distances so that we don't start bringing and drawing defenders towards our teammates. In the third sequence, the ball is transferred to the target player, and the blue players have now moved into the half using the similar concepts as we talked about before: width, and depth and height. And as you can see here, the blue player that was running towards the target player has now moved out and provided a very deep and steep angle to receive the ball. So that has really spread out the two defenders, and now they have much more ground to cover. And obviously, again, the defending team, the Reds, have to try and win possession. And our final slide looks at how we can increase and decrease the challenge. So a couple of ideas. Firstly, you can allow the red team, the defending team, to send a third player in to defend. So now we play a 4 versus 3. That can be done automatically when the ball transfers, or as I mentioned before, maybe it's a fourth pass. So the Blues are trying to become a little bit too confident in their passing. They don't get the ball forward early enough, and as a result, you can send in another player. You can, of course, always reduce the size of the area. So this 15 by 15 yard square, and the same at the other end now, can be a 10 by 10 area. So now the area is much tighter and it's less ground for the defenders to cover. We can limit the number of touches for the attacking team, so they've got to play with more accuracy and speed of play. And then lastly, we can increase the number of passes. So it's no longer 3 passes, it may be 4 or 5 before you pass to the target player. On the reverse of that, we can decrease the challenge by making it a 4 versus 1. The idea that 2 players still remain in the area, but now one of them becomes a zombie defender, meaning that they can't actually start to tackle the ball or put any pressure. They have to just walk around in a trance. Or the other thing we can do, of course, is increase the size of the area, make it more ground for the red team, in this case, to defend. So that's all we have time for, coaches, but you can download the activity handout if you're looking at this through our Webinar Jam software. And just a reminder, this activity comes from a new manual, the European Champions, and we're looking at specifically in that manual Bayern Munich, Chelsea and Real Madrid. So Bayern Munich, Chelsea and Barcelona. So if you're interested in that book, please go online. The links are included in the handout. Thanks very much for joining us, and look forward to seeing you the next time on Give and Go.